A man, a plan, a canal, Panama. The Panama Canal, a significant engineering feat achieved in the early 20th century by the United States of America, triumphantly connects the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, making both trade and travel easier. With these great triumphs, however, came the tragedies of loss of life, billions of dollars spent by both the French and the U.S., and the infiltration of invasive species.
September 25th, 1859, France started building the Suez Canal. The point was to connect the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean Sea, and to gain influence in Africa. On November 17th, 1879, the Suez Canal was completed by the same man who attempted to build the Panama Canal, Ferdinand de Lesseps. But little did they know, making the Suez Canal was child's play compared to the challenges they would face in building the Panama Canal.
A few years prior, in 1843, the French government first started surveying Central America for the best place to build a transoceanic waterway to connect the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. When the surveyors reported back, they had found 5 possible routes. They favored a canal in Nicaragua instead of Panama.
In December of 1879, France took interest in building a Panamanian canal. Ferdinand de Lesseps began building the Panama Canal in 1881. The French experienced many drawbacks, including financial problems, mosquito-borne illnesses, deadly machinery accidents, and unsanitary working and living conditions. They also realized that it was too difficult to build a sea-level canal. By 1886, both workers and investors were losing confidence in the project. Once they realized the problems in building a sea-level canal, they tried to make plans for a lock canal. But it was already too late. With the extreme level of labor required and a substantial deficit, the French abandoned the project. By this time, the French had lost over 20,000 workers, and 800,000 investors were financially ruined.
In 1898, the Spanish-American War created the need for a way to cross the Panamanian Isthmus necessary. When the routes were assessed, it seemed more logical to build a sea route, but the problem would be building it. A sea route would be more efficient and lucrative, but it was also harder to build. With a sea route, you could sail straight through the tropics and never have to face the treacherous conditions around Cape Horn, the southernmost point of South America, or the Strait of Magellan.
In 1899, U.S. President William McKinley formed the U.S. Isthmian Canal Commission to start investigating possible routes for a canal. After careful consideration, many people in Congress and 2 presidential canal commissions favored a route through Nicaragua, but the president at the time, Theodore Roosevelt, decided that the canal would be built in Panama instead.
Sometime later, the United States acquired the incomplete canal from France, including the equipment and buildings, for $40 million. In 1904, the American government sent a party of 19 to survey the area of Gatan in Panama. They concluded that it would be nearly impossible to build a canal through the harsh Panamanian countryside.
In June 1904, the chief engineer of the Panama Canal, John Findlay Wallace, arrived in Panama to begin the project. Along with him was William C. Gorgas, who came to assess the sanitary conditions of the canal zone. 1 year later, John Wallace resigned. Construction on the canal restarted shortly after he left.
One of the biggest challenges in building the canal would be engineering and installing a lock system to restrain the oceans. Without the locks, a 5-knot current would flow through Panama. After many months of trying, they finally devised a plan that would flood the locks and raise ships up to an artificial lake of 87 feet above sea level. At the other side of this lake, ships were lowered back to sea level and finished the trip across the canal. Unskilled workers, also known as silver workers, lived in horrible conditions that were overcrowded and had no window or door screens to keep the mosquitoes out. The skilled workers, also known as the gold workers, lived in less crowded barracks with screened porches. Workers were given the choice to bring their families with them to the isthmus. If the workers chose to do so, silver workers were provided with a small crowded family home with no mosquito screens. Gold workers were given a home to live in, or a bigger dwelling with 2 or 4 other families.
Life in the Canal Zone was mainly focused on work. Workdays were Monday through Saturday and lasted 10 hours. Equipment repairs often spilled over onto Sundays, forcing some people to work on their only day off. The Isthmus and Canal Commission controlled every aspect of the lives of the workers. To succeed in the building the canal, the commission needed healthy, stable, and content employees. The employees also needed to know that their jobs were important to the success of the project. Construction on the canal was very dangerous, with about 10 to 11 worker deaths weekly. One cause of this was that there were very few worker safety laws, so workers could walk across high locks with no safety equipment, stand on bulldozers, and jump on moving trains with sharp objects.
Natural obstacles were many while building the canal. For every 5 cubic yards of dirt that were moved, 1 cubic yard slid back into the canal. Also, to be able to transport materials to the necessary locations, a railway had to be constructed by the canal to move all of the equipment for digging the canal.
The Canal Zone has little variation in seasons, which means that the mosquitoes never disappeared. Yellow fever was eventually eradicated from Panama, but not before it took its toll of more than 1,000 lives. There were still many deaths during the building of the Panama Canal. They died from dynamite blasts, drowning, railroad accidents, falling off of high places, malaria, and many other tragedies hit the isthmus hard, but did not halt the building of the canal.
The building of this canal was lengthy, costly, and treacherous. Worker accidents occurred daily, and digging was slow. The project seemed nearly impossible, but each day, progress was made, and the canal seemed like it may come together. Then one day, the diggers met in the middle of the Cerebra Cut. All that was left to make the canal usable was water. On January 7th, 1914, the first ship passed through the Panama Canal, marking the beginning of a new age of travel.
On August 15th, 1914, the Panama Canal opened. Unfortunately, this momentous occasion was overshadowed by the beginning of World War I, just a few months prior, on July 28th. Soon, the Panama Canal was used for everything from the distribution of goods to passage for warships, and only requires 210 people to keep it operating.
The U.S. spent millions of dollars making the Panama Canal, and it has been able to defend the canal through the U.S. military budget.
In 1989, the U.S. refused to give the canal to Panama. As a result of this, Panama demanded that the Panama Canal be given to them immediately because Congress had still not given the canal to them. Then, in 1999, the U.S. finally gave the canal to Panama. As Anne Graham puts it, December 31st, 1999 was designated as the day when the entire canal would be turned over to Panama for good.
During the construction of the canal, a method of eradicating mosquito-borne illnesses was made. Some of the steps include draining all pools, cutting the grass and the bushes, screening all buildings, and killing all adult mosquitoes. This method was used to eradicate other deadly mosquito-borne diseases from around the world, resulting in thousands of lives being saved from disease. Prices for shipping goods around the world also decreased drastically after the canal was built. After the canal had opened, there was a rush of many ships looking to cross it, and with that came a flood of money for the United States. But to build this canal, the U.S. had spent about $375,000, but had made a substantial portion of that back within its first year of being commercially open to all types of vessels.
The canal saves resources by cutting more than 8,000 miles off of the trip from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. When the canal opened, it showed the world that engineering that was once thought impossible is now possible.
Despite these negative consequences, the Panama Canal represents a triumph in human engineering. It demonstrates the determination of humans, like the determination of humans when building the Empire State Building. It was said by many of the greatest architects of the time, the canal, like the pyramids or some imposing object of natural scenery, is scale and simplicity and directness. One feels that anything done merely for the purpose of beautifying it would not only fail to accomplish that purpose, but would also be an imperative.